Hello, thank you for choosing my video. My name is Sean Smith, and I'm the author of the sci-fi adventure novel, The Legendary Magistrate of Zar. Script 1, Molla's Pebble. Will The Legendary Magistrate of Zar be your #1 beach read this summer? I certainly hope so. Today I'm going to read a passage from the second chapter of the novel just to give you a little taste of the story. If you're reading along, I will be starting on page 57. Young Willen wore a small locket on a chain around his neck. It was nothing special, neither yellow pure metal nor white pure metal, and it did not sparkle with tiny red or blue or green jewels. It was plain to the eye, a dull metal that would not shine with polishing. On it the letters W and M were engraved, not standing apart but entwined together. Inside the locket was a pebble. When only 3 days remained before his leaving day, young Willen's girl, Molla, followed the stream up the mountain to its source. She awoke and dressed while it was still dark, and then after she washed her face and brushed her hair, she sat at the front window and waited. Eager for the first hint of light, she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. That was Molla. She was always ready and would have her way no matter how early she had to push the blankets aside and leave sleep behind. The cold water on her face refreshed her, startled her awake, and she had hurried the few brush strokes through her hair. Willen loved to sit quietly and watch Molla brush her hair. It was as black as the deepest night without a single star, and it fell loosely here and there on her shoulders. Suddenly she would lay her brush down and take Willen's hand in her own and press it against the bottom of her cheek so he would know the softness she kept for him. With the first gray smudge of dawn, she crept out the door and walked quickly down the path to the place where the fields met the mountain and the woods. As she started down the path, she saw the mountain in the distance, covered with woods that were thick and dark with trees. But by the time she reached the mountain, streaks of color cut into the sky, and she could see clearly enough to make her way into the trees. She had only 1 day to go there and return, and the small pool of pure water at the source of the stream was so very far away. Up high onto the mountain she would have to climb. That was all she knew. That, and to follow the stream the whole way, never losing sight of it. Stay with the stream, the older women said, or you will lose time trying to find your way, and you will have to turn back. But the stream was not so easy to follow. At different places, it was out in the open. She climbed alongside of it, moving up and up, hurrying with nothing blocking her way. To her right, the stream flowed down the mountain, curving this way and that without making a sound. It slipped over and around the rocks and eased down between its banks almost as if it was not moving at all. This was in those easy open spaces where it was just a matter of struggling up and breathing and keeping her footing. She felt the muscles in her legs stretching and alive, and she pushed forward, always up and up and up, 1 foot and then the other. Then there were the deep woods, thick with trees and bushes that were as a wall and blocked her view of the stream. She panicked a little then, squeezing between bushes, anxious to find the stream again, and all the while climbing. Again and again, as she was slowed while pushing under and around branches, she would tell herself to hurry, hurry, the sun will not wait. Everywhere there were sharp thorns surprising her and drawing blood. After the first thorns cut into her legs, she tried to watch for them, but she never saw them in time. It was as if they hid in among the leaves and waited with the patience of all time for the exact moment to attack. She would see them, but only after a single thorn would hook and tear into the flesh of one of her arms, or a vine covered with tiny barbed thorns, pointed and sharp as sewing needles, would wrap around and tangle and claw into one of her legs. And then she would cry tears with the pain, but still hurrying, hurrying. Up and up she climbed, sometimes clutching at whatever was in front of her to keep from losing her footing. She held on to boulders jutting out from the ground and climbed up and over them as she moved forward. She grabbed long, low branches and pulled herself up to a place where she could reach out for something else to hold on to and then take a few steps more. And all the while she struggled to keep the stream in sight. She would lose it and then find it again. For most of the way she was under trees and in the shade, but at times she would come out of the woods into open spaces of meadow, or onto great white boulders, and the sun weighed down on her neck and shoulders as she climbed. It was getting hotter. The day passed quickly out of morning into afternoon, and she began to worry. She must reach the pool and return down the mountain before the last colors of the sun and clouds melted into darkness, or what was given to her from the pool would mean nothing. It was in thick woods that she lost the stream. The climb had become less steep, but the branches and bushes and vines all wrapped around each other and were knotted together on a wall impossible to breach. She had to move to her left, and then even further to her left, until she could no longer see the stream. She worked her way up and through and around, but time passed and more time passed, until she finally came into a clearing and was able to make her way back toward the stream. But the stream had disappeared and she could not find it. She felt cold inside, a wild panic, and she hurried out of the clearing and into the woods, pushing aside branches and tearing vines out of her way. A large thorn dug into the back of her right hand and she ripped it out. There was no time to stop and feel the pain. Minutes were galloping away. She looked up to see where the sun was in the sky, but branches blocked her view. She had to start back soon, and she had already taken too much time. She was lost and had not found the pool. Stay with the stream, the women had said, but how could she when there was no way through? Maybe it is only a little further, she thought. Calm yourself, keep your wits, she thought. You will find it. She turned around and made her way back into the clearing. She looked in every direction and started off this way and that, but then she would stop and turn and start again. Panic will not help, she suddenly thought, and she stopped and stood still, her heart beating inside her like 100 smith's hammers. It was only after she stopped herself and forced herself to breathe slowly and find a moment of calm that she saw the path. It was an opening into the woods at the bottom of the clearing. She had been searching to find a place with a clear view up the mountain, but now there seemed to be a path below her, down the mountain, out of the clearing and into thick trees and bushes. It was not a wide opening, nor was it very tall, but the grass on the ground in front of it was flattened and worn away in places with use, and the dirt and mud of the worn places were covered with small paw prints. This was a way to water. It had to be. She hurried downhill and fitted herself into the opening. It was a hallway of branches with a low ceiling, a tunnel through the woods. As soon as she entered, she turned sideways to squeeze through, watching for vines with thorns. Please, she thought, please, it has to be here. It did not take long for her to come through the woods and out into the open. Here she came into another small clearing surrounded by thick woods. The clearing made its way up the side of the mountain, bordered all around by branches and bushes. And there was the stream. She saw it immediately. Almost at the top of the clearing, small round boulders jutted out from the mountainside. At different places between the boulders, water broke through and gushed out and then down, mixing together and forming a single stream that flowed into a small pool. The pool was like a cup catching the pour from a pitcher. Then the overflow from the pool poured over its lower edge and was the beginning of the stream flowing to the bottom of the mountain. As soon as she saw it, all fear, all panic left her. A promise of life, a promise all her own, filled her body and her heart and was there so deep inside of her that she could not breathe. Her fingers tingled and trembled. All of her body tingled and trembled, and her heart pounded like summer thunder. She was never so alive. Tears flowed out of her eyes and down her face just as the stream broke through the boulders and flowed down into the pool. She was weeping and laughing at the same time as she scrambled up to the pool. She shook her head to come back to herself, but she could not hold back the tears, and she laughed and sobbed. Calm yourself, she thought, calm yourself. You have found the pool. Now you must choose and then hurry back down the mountain before the sun deserts you. She wiped her eyes to push away the tears, and then she knelt down beside the pool and looked into it. It was not deep, only an arm's length from the surface to the bottom, and the water was so clear she could see the mounds of pebbles laying at the bottom. There were no plants in the water, nor was there any mud to make the pool murky, only the little hills of pebbles along the bottom glowing white in the sunlight. It was as if they had been placed there. How else could these little piles of pebbles have come to be there? Not valuable gems, just small, flat, milky pebbles, all of them similar in size and shape. Hundreds of them, she guessed, thousands. Had one of the gods emptied their sack of pebbles into the pool to keep them safe, as many of the women believed? There was no time now to think of these things. Everything, every day to come from this moment on, waited at the bottom of the pool for her to grasp in her hand and take with her. She had to hurry. The sun was not as warm on her shoulders as it had been just a little while before, and she had to be down the mountain and out of the woods before the last ray of light gave itself over to darkness. She skimmed the surface of the water with 2 fingers and thought she had never felt water so cold, as if a winter's night filled the pool. She thought of the stars in a winter sky, ever so distant and apart and cold. She felt the cold in her heart. Quickly she reached down into the pool and scooped up a handful of pebbles. From her fingertips to her shoulder, her entire arm was immediately numb with the cold, and she felt a sudden panic, as if her hand had been caught in a trap. As soon as she closed her fingers tightly around the pebbles, she yanked her arm from the water. Now her hand was out of the pool and in front of her, waiting to open. Her heart pounded like the 700 blast cannons on Freedom Day. She must hurry. It was so unfair. The sun raced toward night, and there was not enough time to discover all the futures promised by the pebbles. She opened her hand carefully so as not to drop a single pebble. She was certain she had filled her hand to almost overflowing, but now she found only 2 pebbles laying in the palm of her hand. How odd, she thought. Some of the women spoke of countless choices, so many they were dizzy trying to compare and decide, of the smiling faces of 1 or 2 or 3 children, of mountains of coins, of themselves and the husbands they had not yet met, happy in old age. But Molla had been given only 2 paths. With her free hand, Molla picked up one of the pebbles and brought it close to her face so she could examine it. She was startled. She could see everything so clearly. Okay, I'm going to leave it here for today. We plan to make a few more of these videos, so if you are interested, keep your eyes open, like, subscribe. If you want to know more about the novel, take a look at the information in the description box. Thank you again for choosing my video. Have a nice day.